station.
Figure
Some people think the creature was a pterodactyl.
What are you
a
doing?
large
You're
flying
snatching
reptile
this.
from the
Get
Mesozoic
off!
which ended roughly 66 billion years ago.
God, he
Others
already pulled a
believe
bunch
it
of
was
them
a
out.
pterosaur, an
Oh my gosh. I recently went Black Friday shopping at Joann Fabrics and I got a ton of fabric. So I thought it would be fun to kind of make 3 different gift ideas using the same fabric. That way none of my scraps went to waste. So I made these coasters. I also made a scarf. And I made this super luscious throw blanket, which I absolutely love. And I'm so sad I have to give it away as a present because I really wanted to keep it. So let's start by making the blanket. So first I took an old blanket that I really love. I also love the size of this, so I'm kind of using this as my template. I'm laying it down on the floor, kind of getting the measurements for it to see exactly how big it is. And I'm folding it in half, that way it's a little easier to work with and measure out. So once I got my measurements, I'm going to fold this and take it out of the way. So since I'm using this plaid fabric, I'm going to use the lines on it to kind of be my guides for cutting it and getting my measurements. So putting my tape measure down, I'm going to measure out 46 inches. This is going to be the width of my fabric. I'm going to put a pin on the 46-inch mark and also put a pin at the start of my tape measure. So of course you can't forget your seam allowance. So I'm going to move my pin over 1 inch. That'll give me ½ an inch seam allowance on both sides. So using one of the vertical lines on my blanket, I'm going to measure half the length of my blanket, which is 36. I'm going to add 1 inch to the 36. So 37 is going to mark where our fold line of our blanket is going to be. And also make sure that it matches with the first pin that we put in that corner. I'm not going to be cutting both layers, I'm only going to be cutting the side that I can see. So I'm going to fold over the edge of my blanket, and then I'm going to find out which line matches up with the edge of my blanket, and then I take my scissors and just kind of clip it. That way I can find it whenever I flip it over on the other side, and then I can cut all the way across. And then I'm going to finish cutting off the edges. And so this is optional, but I'm going to be putting this really warm, fuzzy fabric as my lining for my blanket. Well, I just put my blanket on top of this and, try to make sure it's as straight as you possibly can get it. It doesn't have to be too perfect. And then just go ahead and cut that out. So once you get all that cut out, you are going to lay both pieces all the way flat, and you're going to put right sides together, and you're going to sew it up just like you would a pillow. And what I mean by that is you're going to be leaving a little spot open. That way you can flip the sucker inside out. So after you sew the whole thing up, you're going to go ahead and flip everything inside out. So now you're going to take that open edge and just tuck everything inside so it's nice and flush with the rest of your hem. And then just sew all the way across. Like so. And so to keep this blanket from getting twisted and derpy looking, I'm going to be using some yarn to make some little twisty ties all over the blanket. And so what I do is I take a pretty big needle, stick it all the way through, and I don't put a knot on the end of it. I just pull it through enough to where there's a good chunk of the thread still sticking out, and then I'm going to go ahead and tie that off with a double knot and then cut it. And I'm going to be making quite a few of them all over the blanket. Just try to evenly space them out as best as you can. If you need to mark them before you actually, tie them, that's fine too. And that's pretty much it. The blanket is done. So now moving on to our scarf. I'm using this long strip that was left from my fabric. So I'm going to take this long strip, fold it in half, and I'm going to cut this strip in half. And the reason I'm doing this because it's not quite long enough to be a scarf, so I'm going to have to add a piece to it, and I'd rather add it to the center of the scarf, that way it looks a little less weird than just adding it to the bottom of it or something. So now what I'm going to do is serge this whole thing. I serged the edges of this, which I think looks really cute. I think I might just leave that the way it is. And so now I'm going to iron this down so it's nice and flat. And then I'm just going to take a sewing needle and just stitch this down, that way it doesn't flip back up. And that's pretty much it! So now moving on to the last project, which is our coasters. I went ahead and serged this last scrap of fabric, put it in the washer and on my dryer, that way it would get warped and shrunk and all that good stuff. That way when I put on the coasters and they want to put something hot or cold, or they get it wet or anything like that, it won't get ruined. So I'm going to be using 12 cork coasters, and then I'm also using these little felt pads as well as some black acrylic paint. First step is painting 6 of our coasters black. So I'm going to be painting one side all black, but on the other side I'm only going to be painting the edges black. And make sure you cover the edges of our coaster, like so. So while all of those are drying, we are going to be taking our other 6 cork coasters and we're going to be putting fabric on top of it. So just figure out how much fabric you need to cover your cork. And then you want to cut out 5 more of these shapes. So take your glue gun and just put a ton of glue on your cork right in the center and stick that down onto your fabric. So once you got that nice and secure, we will start gluing the sides. Now you'll notice I'm not putting glue all the way on the corners, I'm just kind of stopping before I get to the corners. And now you don't have to pull your fabric too tight, just firmly wrap it around the coaster. You just want to make sure the fabric is going to be laying nice and flat. One way you can glue up the corners, which is my preferred way because it's faster and easier in my opinion, is to kind of tuck this into a little corner like so and then cut across it. I'm not cutting it flat across, I'm cutting it at an angle, that way I have some extra fabric on the very tip of this corner. Put some glue around the rim of the fabric and then glue everything down. So you may get burned doing it this way, but I feel like you just get a more flat finish on the coaster. So now hopefully the cork that we painted is all nice and dry, then we can start gluing these things together. So you want to put a ton of glue on the side that is not fully painted, and then put your fabric covered coaster right on top of it. And so like we did before, we're going to glue the sides first, not the corners of our coaster. We're going to wait and do that last. And now as our last finishing touch, we're going to put our little felt pads on the back. And that's it, your coasters are finished. And you're all done! 3 different projects with the same fabric. Hopefully this was interesting and it got your creative juices flowing. I will be back with another tutorial so that we can get some gifts done before the holidays.